Hey there, and welcome back to the Philanthropy Mastermind series. I'm your host, Jay Frost, and if you are new to this, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. We are doing a lot of programming this year, thanks to all of you for tuning in and for all your great ideas. And we have a little survey at the very end today, so you can keep telling us what you want to see and hear, and we would love you to fill that out. So please do stay tuned, and when you leave the room, even if you have to leave early, which I hope you won't, make sure to fill out that survey. It helps a great deal in giving you what you are looking for. And I know one thing that would be listed no matter when we have a survey is something about Amy Eisenstein, who I'm going to introduce to you in a moment. But before I do, I want to welcome you and encourage you to participate today. This is a CFRE accredited session in the Philanthropy Mastermind series. And that means that, of course, there'll be a great deal of sharing by our guest presenter today, but it also is an opportunity for you to go ahead and use the chat and the Q&A throughout. As a person who's been presenting a lot over the years, she'll be monitoring that as well as we will. But do feel free to ask questions or make comments at any point, including starting now by just letting us know where you are tuning in from, and maybe which organization you're with, and maybe what you're looking for in today's topic, which of course is set your campaign up for success. 3 all-important pre-campaign strategies. We've got the right person to talk about that. That is, again, Amy Eisenstein. I know that's why you're here. You may not know her work, though, so I'll give you just a thumbnail sketch. She is definitely one of the leaders in our field and has been for quite some time. She's the author of no less than 3 books. Maybe there are more than 3, but the 3 that come to mind are Major Gift Fundraising for Small Shops, Raising More with Less, 50 Asks in 50 Weeks. In addition to that, of course, she's the head of, or rather the CEO of Capital Campaign Pro. She's an AFP Master Trainer. She holds the ACFRE, which is the highest form of credentialing within our field, within the profession. But most of all, she's a person who shares, and she's doing that again today. She's done it before in this series. You can look for recordings of the past, and you can also see her on stages throughout the field, both virtual and real life, in this year to come. So with that, it's a great pleasure to welcome back Amy Eisenstein. Amy?
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that very generous introduction. It's nice to see people sharing where they're from, what organization they're with. I love seeing people. We've got John from New Zealand. Oh, hi, John. Nice to see you. Thank you for tuning in. People from Michigan to Massachusetts to Georgia to California to New York. I'm calling in from New Jersey today, and it's really nice to be here with you. As Jay said, I would love to answer your questions and have a chat going on during the session. So do feel free to use your chat box. If there's a specific question you're hoping that I answer, put it in the Q&A box. Sometimes the chat goes by fairly quickly, and I'm just getting my screen organized. But we're going to talk about capital campaigns and strategies for success. So I'd love to know in the chat, if you would tell me, are you thinking about a campaign, actively planning your campaign, or maybe in the feasibility study stage, or even raising gifts? So let me know, where are you in your campaign? Thank you, Sam, for being first, thinking about it. All right, Tracy needs to launch a campaign. Excellent. Okay, fantastic. Keep it coming. Where are you in your campaign planning? So let's go ahead and get started while you're doing that. So how do you start with a campaign, and what is critical for success? So first of all, a vision. What is your big idea, right? Campaigns are about raising a ton of money and moving your organization to the next level of service. So it's way beyond your annual fund. Your annual fund lets you do your ongoing programs and services, your everyday operations, and a campaign really should propel your organization to the next level. It's about capacity building, whether that's an actual physical building or a renovation or program expansion or programs started. What is the vision for the next 5 to 10 years of your organization? And how is a campaign going to get you there? Then the campaign objectives are, what will you actually raise the money for? So your vision is to be able to serve the community in a bigger way and provide more services, your objectives might include a building or a parking lot, but a parking lot isn't your vision, but that might be something that is part of your vision, allowing more people to come access your services. So what will you raise the money for? Then your working goal is how much will it cost? So when you think about your campaign goal, it shouldn't be arbitrary. It should be tied to the vision, accomplishing the vision, and the specific campaign objectives. So if you have an anniversary coming up and it's your 50th anniversary of your organization, while that may be very exciting to you, that does not mean you should be having a $50 million capital campaign for your 50th anniversary, unless there's, by major coincidence, $50 million helps you accomplish your vision and your objectives for the next 5 to 10 to 50 years. So your working goal is actually tied to your vision and objectives. And then from there, you can develop a case for support. And that's really about why others care. Why should anybody else care about your campaign? Why should, of course, they consider giving to your campaign? So I want to get started with a story about one of our clients named Angela. And Angela worked at Tabby's Place, a cat shelter and sanctuary. And Tabby's Place has a lot of very generous, loyal donors who send in $25, $50, $100 a year, and they have a very broad base of supporters and a very generous annual fund. And the co-founder or the founding director of Tabby's Place wanted to create a center for cats with feline leukemia because he had lost his cat to feline leukemia. And so they determined that they wanted to do a capital campaign for $1.3 million. That's what it was going to cost to set up this campaign and create this program. And so they talked about it for years. They tried to figure out how are they going to do this. Nobody at the organization had campaign experience, which is not unusual. It's actually very common that nobody at an organization has extensive campaign experience. So they talked about it and talked about it. And one day a donor sort of emerges with a $300,000 gift, which is very significant at Tabby's Place. And so that was sort of like, okay, we've got this $300,000 gift towards our $1.3 million campaign. So that must be a sign and alignment that we're going to get started on this campaign. And so they did what they knew how to do, which was write a letter to their big base of supporters. And they created a beautiful brochure, a campaign brochure, and wrote this very heartfelt letter and asked their base for support to consider gifts of $10,000 to support their $1 million goal to help them build this feline leukemia center. So they sent out this brochure and this letter and to nearly 1,000 potential donors. And guess how many people responded? What are you going to guess? 20 people? So if they were collecting gifts in the range of $10,000, they needed 100 to meet their $1 million goal. If you took out your calculator and did some math, they needed 100 gifts. Kathleen, you're guessing 0. You're very close. Oh, Marie, you're closer. They got 2. Right? They got 2 gifts of $10,000. They raised $20,000 from this mail campaign that they were hoping would raise $1 million. So they established that they needed some more expertise and campaign strategy. So let's figure out. Oh, by the way, before we get into that, I do want to tell you that they didn't raise. They started working with us, of course. They started working with us. We applied the principles that I'm going to take you through today, and they didn't raise the $1.3 million they needed. They raised $2 million, right? So we were super excited by that, of course, because they just came off this really disappointing mail campaign. But they applied what we're going to talk about today, and they were able to raise even more than they needed, almost twice as much. All right, so strategies for successful campaigns that we're going to go through today. Number one is engage donors early. So Tabby's Place didn't do that. They didn't engage their donors. They just sent them a request for money. Focus on the few. They also didn't do that. They sent the letter and the mailing to all 1,000 donors on their list. And engage expertise is the third point we're going to talk about. And until they tried something that didn't work, they didn't engage expertise. So we're going to talk about all those three strategies that once they applied, they actually were able to raise nearly twice their goal. I see a question popped up. Sandy, you're asking, what if you're a newer organization and don't have big donors? How does a smaller organization prepare for a campaign? You know what? That is exactly the story that I'm telling you right now. So we're going to talk about how Tabby's Place and honestly, all of our clients, whether you're raising $2 million or $20 million or $200 million, these are the strategies that work no matter the size of the campaign. So, Tabby's Place, the story I just told, they didn't have any big donors. They had $25 donors, $50 donors, $100 donors, and they needed to raise over $1 million. And they did exactly that. They engaged their with our help, right? Once they knew what to do, we're going to talk about these three strategies. So let's dive into it. So here's a campaign timeline. And we break a campaign down into 7 phases. And so many of you are starting with pre-campaign planning, which is wonderful. That is when it's time to start engaging donors for the first time. And the first strategy is engage donors early. So we're going to look at these 7 phases. Actually, we're going to really just look at the first 3 and talk about how to engage donors 3 times potentially before you ever ask them for money. You're not fundraising in a campaign until the quiet phase, which is phase 4. And so let's look at the opportunities to engage your donors early. So pre-campaign planning. Really thinking about, as you're preparing your project, who are the donors in your database and in your community who have the potential to give you the kind of gifts that you need to be successful. And so you're going to start out asking for advice. Don't even worry about money. I mean, you do need to focus. We'll talk about focusing on the few, but really asking for advice. So going to people who have sit on boards of organizations in your community that have recently completed campaigns. You might look at the board of the hospital, the local hospital that's just done a campaign, and see that that person donates $50 a year to you. So they have some connection to you. They've shown some interest in your mission. And you might call them and say, listen, we're thinking about a campaign. We're really early in the planning process. Can you give us some wisdom and advice that you learned going through the recent hospital campaign that might be applicable to us? Like, what are your lessons learned? So you're going to engage donors early. So in the pre-campaign planning, another example might be if you're looking to buy a building or to renovate a building. You might go to some donors who have expertise in real estate or construction, and you might say to them, you know what? We're great at taking care of kids, caring for cats, curing cancer, whatever your mission is, but we have no experience in buying a building or construction projects. Tell us, what should we be thinking about? How do we think about real estate or buying a building or financing? You can go to your donors for whatever expertise they have and ask them for advice way early. One common mistake that I see organizations make and nonprofit leaders make is that they think they shouldn't go talk to their donors until their plans are finalized or in a beautiful, beautiful brochure. Well, honestly, that's too late. And so you really want to go to your donors way early. You don't have to have your plans finalized. In fact, in order for them to give you really advice, you shouldn't have them finalized. So Sandy, I see your question. I'm going to hold off on that. Let me try and circle back to that in a little bit. Let me keep going for a little bit. Yeah. So Jane, you are asking about a capital campaign for something non-tangible, program expansion for sure. You can absolutely do that. It's the same idea. It's capacity building. So what do you need to build capacity? You need more staff. You need more infrastructure. You need more programs. You need program expansion. Same idea. So feasibility study. This is the second opportunity to engage donors early. This is our first pre-campaign strategy. And let me tell you why this is so important. So donors that feel they're partners with you and not just pocketbooks, right? Donors don't want to feel like ATMs. You've probably heard that before, money machines. They really want to feel engaged. They want to feel like they're in the early phases, right? So if they're hearing about the project before anybody else, before it's even finalized, they're really insiders. You're coming to them for advice, for feedback, for their opinions. And so a feasibility study is a formal opportunity to interview key prospects, prospective donors in the process. And so this is an amazing opportunity for you to engage your donors early. And you are going to be interviewing in a feasibility study maybe the 30 most, the biggest potential donors to your campaign. If you're raising, more than $2 million, which is the vast majority of capital campaigns, you are going to be interviewing 6- and 7-figure prospects, hopefully, right? If you interview people who don't have the financial capacity to give you significant gifts, you are going to get disappointing results. So this is really a key way to engage key donors early. Okay. So Sandy, you're asking when a BIPOC organization needs to raise capital, you never hear back from funders. So, let's see if we can get to strategies for getting people to talk to you. But, I think lots of organizations feel that way. But it is about networking and strategies. Let me see if I have time to get to some of those. Okay. Campaign planning. So this is the third opportunity to engage your donors early, right? So you may have talked to a single donor 3 or 4 or even 5 times before you ever consider asking them for a gift. This is all cultivation. It's early cultivation for your campaign. So this is an opportunity to review your plans with key leaders and key prospective donors. So in the feasibility study, you may have asked them for feedback, and based on the feedback that you heard, you may adjust your plans, change your plans, modify them, and finalize your campaign plans. So this is an opportunity to call in a few key donors or potential donors and leaders and say, hey, we're finally ready to head into a campaign. We got all this feedback in the feasibility study. We've adapted based on what we heard collectively. Give it a final review. What stands out? What catches your eye? What concerns you? What are your thoughts? So really going to people for advice in these early stages. So I just want to reiterate, this is a unique opportunity to engage your donors early and often, way before you ask for a gift. And that is key to success. I mean, when we do sort of a post-mortem on a campaign, we look at who made the biggest gifts and were they engaged early on. The vast majority of significant campaign contributions come from active volunteers, people who were engaged early. So super important to take advantage of all of that pre-campaign planning. So what happened with Angela, right? How did she turn her failed sort of case for support mailing into this amazingly successful campaign by, after they experienced that that initial lesson learned, right? All you can say is they tried something, it didn't work, they needed to pivot, and they did. And so she started to work with us. We looked really hard in their database because they really didn't know who could give 5- and 6-figure gifts for their campaign. And so we looked in their donor base. We looked at who their loyal donors were. We did some wealth screening. We talked to committee members and volunteers about who they knew in the community that were already supporters. And they looked for genuine opportunities to build those relationships and sort of went back to the drawing board and started from scratch, and really went to their donors for advice. They said, look, we want to do this. Is this project exciting to you? How would you think about it? How should we talk about it? Why is it appealing? Why does the community need it? Why might we not need it? So they did a lot of question asking and engaging of donors. And then guess what? They built the relationships. They went back and did it the right way, and they raised nearly double their goal. Okay. All right. So engage donors early. That's the first point. The second point is the second strategy, I should say, is focusing on the few. So engage your donors early, way before your plans are final and way before you ask them for a gift. And the next point is focusing on the few. So who are the few? So really, let's think about where the money will come from for your campaign. More than 50% of the money is going to come from your top 20 donors. So there's no reason to focus on 1,000 people, honestly, or even 100 people. I want you to get it down even farther than that. So really splicing and dicing your list and discussing donors and looking at your loyal donors and your largest lifetime donors and who's in the community. So I'm going to show you a basic gift range chart here. If you're heading into a campaign, you will be doing a gift table like this. We call it a gift range chart, but you might know it as a gift pyramid or a gift table. This one's for $1 million, but truthfully, it's the same whether you're raising $10 million or $100 million. It's just zeros. Now, if you look at the first row here, you'll see that the first gift we have is about 25% of the campaign goal. We do recommend that your lead gift be 20 to 30%, so 25% of the campaign goal. Oh boy, my mouse is playing tricks on me today. Okay, so we're going to look here, and if I just want to walk you through if you're not super familiar with this, because this is actually the ultimate campaign tool. This is the roadmap to your campaign. So the first column is number of gifts, and you'll see that it's in ascending order, right? We need one gift of 250,000, one gift of 100,000, then 2 gifts of 50,000, 6 gifts of 25,000, 10 gifts of 10,000. And then the gift size total, and then cumulative, how much have you raised? And you'll see that the column on the farthest right is approximately double, or it gets to triple as we go down, the number of prospective donors you need for each gift at that level. So if you need one gift of 250,000, you want at least 2 prospective donors that you think can and might give you a gift of that size, that you would ask for a gift of that size. Okay. So 20 gifts. We talked about 20 gifts getting you to over 50% of your goal. So 70% of your goal in this particular example from 50 prospective donors. That is the capital campaign formula. And so all campaigns work this way. So focus on the few. You'll raise the rest of the money from your base of support, but really this is true for all sizes of campaigns. Now, I do want to say that depending on your organization, your gift table or gift pyramid may be a little bit narrower or steeper or wider. So, for example, if you're at an independent school and you have a fairly small base of donors, the families that attend and maybe some grandparents, you may need a lead gift of 30% or 35%, and your campaign chart may be tall and narrow. If you're at an animal shelter like Angela is, and you have a really wide base of support, it might be a little bit flatter, but you still need to do campaign math to make sure that you have the number of donors and prospects to get you towards your goal. Let's see. I'm just peeking at the questions for a minute. Kate is asking, when you get general questions, how do you count deferred plan gifts? So Kate, you're asking about counting plan gifts, I think, and you need cash now. So, you need both, right? And you'll have campaign policies that talk about how to count plan gifts and whether or not you count plan gifts. You may not count them towards your campaign, or you may count them by number of gifts. So we have some campaigns that count numbers of bequests. So a goal might be to get 25 new bequest intentions, but it doesn't go to the sort of the top of the line campaign goal that we need to build the building. All right, so the second point is focus on the few. Hold on, I'm gonna sneeze. Okay, went away. It'll come back. So our campaign formula is 20 gifts to get you to 50, 60, or 70% of your goal, and from 50 prospects. So really the second strategy is focusing on the few. Okay, so where are we going to find these donors, right? I mean, to me, this is everybody's question. Where are we going to get these donors? Oh my goodness, my mouse is just playing tricks on me today. Okay, so we're going to apply our ABC filter, our prospect filter here. And we're going to look for donors who have the ability to make those gifts, right? If we're looking for one gift of 250,000, we really need to find a donor who has demonstrated ability, if we can, to make a gift of that size. So maybe somebody gives your organization $1,000 a year, but they gave the local hospital $250,000 a year. So even though they don't give your organization anywhere close to that kind of gift, they have demonstrated the ability to give that kind of gift. We're also looking for donors who have a strong belief in your mission. So they need to believe in your cause. And these are your loyal, longtime donors, people who currently give. Maybe they're active volunteers. So people who have demonstrated interest and belief in your mission. And of course, they need to have contact with your organization. So if anybody around your boardroom says, how about Oprah Winfrey? Or, and how about Bill Gates, right? No, we don't have contact with them. They won't respond to our emails. They won't pick up the phone. We can't get a meeting with them. They're not good prospects for us. So even though it may take a call or two or an email or three to get donors to respond to you, everybody's busy, and that's fine. Sometimes, Mackenzie Scott. Thank you, Kate. That is exactly the name that I was looking for that was escaping me. So we really want to make sure that people have that they're ABC qualified. So when you're looking for donors, those top 50 prospects, we want to ABC qualify them before they go in your top 50 list. So these can be individuals, foundations, corporations. It's probably going to be a combination of the three. It's going to be people who are already giving to your organization, most likely, even if they're giving very small amounts. They might be giving $50 a year or $100 a year. Now, you may be thinking, like, how does somebody go from $50 a year or even $1,000 a year to $500,000 a year? Well, there's a couple of things. One is, up until this point, you may not have had a $50,000 idea or a $2 million idea or a $2 million project, right? And so there's no motivation on the part of the donors just to say, let me give this organization $2 million, because you haven't had a $2 million concept yet. And the second reality is, you haven't asked them for a gift of $1 million or $50,000 or whatever the case may be, because you haven't had $1 million project or $1 million idea before. So, their giving potentially is in line with what you're asking them for, or certainly if you're sending them direct mail and you're not asking them for any specific amount at all, they're just sending in a token gift. But now that you have $1 million idea, and have the reason to ask them for $1 million gift, they might be motivated to do that. So the other people that to consider are major donors in your community. I encourage you to go into all the public spaces that might have donor walls, the library, the hospital, the Performing Arts Center, all the pillars of your community, to look at their donor walls and see. Take pictures of them. Who are the donors on their walls that also give, that are in your database, that give you $50 or $100 or $1,000 a year? And seriously consider past and current board members. Don't leave them off. Don't make the assumption that they can't or won't give. They're your most likely donors. All right, so back to Angela for just a minute. So they absolutely did this. They focused on the few like crazy. They, got rid of this notion that 100 people were going to give or 1,000 people were going to give. And they really targeted their asks. So they narrowed their list. They worked like crazy to research and narrow their list and focus on the few and engage them. And the end of the story. They raised over $2 million. All right, so the final point that we're going to talk about today, and then I'm going to try and leave room for questions. I see them coming in. Yeah, so let me address some questions towards the end. I'm going to leave time. But the third point we're going to talk about is engaging expertise. So you've engaged donors early, you've focused on the few, and now it's time to engage expertise. Actually, these should be flipped. We should have started with engage expertise, but that wouldn't have made for such a compelling webinar. So really engage expertise so that they can help you engage donors early and focus on the few. Okay, so why do we want to engage expertise? Does it really matter? So here's the bottom line. Campaigns are occasional. You're probably doing one every 10 to 20 years. And so the reality is, or maybe you've never done one. For many of you, this may be your first ever campaign. And so you don't have a lot of board members or staff members who have extensive campaign experience. And when I say extensive, I mean having planned and executed a campaign or multiple campaigns from start to finish. So you may have a development director who was around for the last half of a campaign or the first half of a campaign, or maybe they were a junior development person at an organization that had a campaign, but they weren't really engaged in the strategy and the planning of it. You may have some board members who have participated on some campaigns, but most board and staff members have limited campaign experience. They've been around for pieces of campaign, but not multiple campaigns from start to finish. So the next point is that campaigns are special. They are over and above your annual fund. And everybody's worried about a campaign taking over an annual fund and that you won't have, that your annual fund will go down. And you know what? There are specific best practices and strategies to make sure that that doesn't happen, and that you need your team to be paying attention to that and ask for campaign gifts that are over and above annual fundraising. Annual gifts come first. But if you don't know that, then you might put all your attention and energy on the campaign and then the annual fund will go down, and that doesn't help anybody. Campaigns are strategic and complex. There is a method to the madness. There are best practices, there's special strategy, and it's not the same as annual fundraising. And they're so enormous that failure is not an option. And so you need to really access the kind of help that you need so that you plan it right. You know, the thing that really makes me super sad as a fundraiser is when organizations come to us and they say, well, you know, my board wanted us to do this ourselves. And so we were going gangbusters and we raised, you know, 60% of the goal, and now we're stuck. And, you know, they didn't take the time to plan. They didn't take the time to engage donors early. They didn't make an appropriate campaign plan. They didn't put strategy and best practice in place. And so, of course, the first gifts are easy. I have to say, you know, the first 50%, those are the easy gifts. Once you get past that, if you haven't done good planning, it's really, really difficult. And so the good news is that these days, with the internet and with Zoom and with technology, there is such a huge continuum of campaign support available. You don't have to go with a traditional full service consultant, although certainly you can. That is one option, but let's look at the continuum of support. So you could opt for really, truly do it yourself, Google, make it up as you go. That is one option, and that is free. That's at one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is full service embedded consultant. That's another option. That's the most expensive option. And, you know, some boards feel comfortable and happy with that. To me, I think that there's so many great options in the middle now. So you don't have to be Googling your way to a campaign, and you don't have to have full service support either. There's like a myriad of options, from do-it-yourself online tools, group coaching, to expertise, to advising and consulting. And so to me, it's about really figuring out what kind of support does your organization need? What kind of expertise do you have? What do you need to tap into to be successful? So let me give one example of where it's really useful to have a consultant or to have expertise. A feasibility study is the beginning step of most campaigns. It's the ultimate planning tool. As you saw in the timeline, it's a really important opportunity to engage your donors early and focus on the few. So to me, this is where you want to start your campaign planning. So let me just talk about benefits of doing a feasibility study. So one, it requires a clear plan. Now, not that your campaign plans need to be finalized, but your ideas do need to be clear. You can't go to donors and say, we have no idea what we want to do. We kind of know we want to grow. We know we want to get bigger. No. Feasibility studies, or when you go to donors, you want to have a clear sense of what you want to do, even though you may not know how you're going to do it or all of the details. So a feasibility study does force you to start developing your plans. Now, they engage prospective donors early. That's one of our key points, right? So this is a structured process for going to prospective donors early and reviewing your plans and collecting their feedback. So one of the key things we've already talked about today. It also forces you to focus on your top donors. You can't interview hundreds of people or even 100 people because nobody has the time or the bandwidth to do that. And so you really do, this is an opportunity to start to narrow your list and focus on those people that can give 5, 6, and really 6 and 7 figure gifts. That's who you should be interviewing. So going through the steps of a feasibility study will force you to focus on the top donors. The good news is feasibility studies also clarify strengths and weaknesses and provide outside perspectives from the donors that you talk to. And so you may learn things about your organization and have an opportunity to sort of self-correct and adjust before you head into a campaign. And to me, the best news about a feasibility study is it gives the board confidence, because as a lot of you have been asking questions about small shops, I'll start to get to questions in about 5 minutes or so. Your board may not have lots of experience with campaigns. In fact, it's highly likely that your board members do not have campaign experience. So when you, as staff, go to board members and say, hey, should we do a campaign? Or, they have no idea. They're nervous. They don't want to say yes. They don't want to be responsible for a campaign. But if you've taken your idea and gotten sort of a literal and figurative thumbs up and a go ahead from your 30 biggest prospective donors, there's nothing that gives the board more confidence than saying, okay, our top 30 donors, or a chunk of them are on board with this project. They're excited. So let's look at 2 models of feasibility studies. One I'm going to call the old model, and then of course we're going to have the new model. But in the old model, the consultant develops the plan, the consultant interviews your donors confidentially, and the consultant writes the report and makes recommendations. So that's one model of feasibility study. Now let's look at some pros and cons of that model. So the pros are those consultants that do those feasibility studies, heck, they are experienced interviewers, which is great. And they build the board confidence, which is also great. Board members will tell you that confidential interviews consultants that are doing these types of feasibility studies love to talk about these confidential interviews. Now, I was just talking to a nonprofit leader and executive director who said that one of her biggest donors told her, I wasn't going to tell that outside strange consultant what I was going to give to the campaign. So their feasibility study results were disappointing, but this woman hadn't told the consultant what she would give, and she wound up giving 7 figures to the campaign. But confidential interviews, I've got a question mark there. The cons are it's an opaque process. It draws criticism with no recourse. So what do I mean by that? So consultants that do these interviews ask for concerns from donors, but nobody gets back to them. If the interviews are confidential and anonymous, the donors are sort of left without anybody getting back to them about their concerns. They don't build donor relationships, and there's no path to solicitation because you don't know who said what. So I'm going to add confidential interviews back on the con list as well. So now let me talk about this new model of feasibility study, because I think it's one area to tap that you could tap into expertise to really set up your campaign for success. So in this new model, we're calling it the guided feasibility study. The consultant helps leaders develop the plan and prepare for these interviews. But the big difference is that the organization's leaders, do the interviews. And so you, the executive director, the development director, the board chair, are in the room with your donors. So, and then collaboratively, the consultant and the organization's leaders write the report and make recommendations to the board. So again, quickly, pros and cons. The pros are they build donor relationships, right? You're interviewing your donors, so that is engaging donors early. You get trained on how to have these strategic conversations. The conversations are open and transparent. They build the board confidence because you're hearing directly from your donors, and it is a natural path to solicitation. And so, you're having these pre-solicitation conversations directly with your donors. So cons, they are more work for staff, but honestly, I don't know what else you would be doing, what other kind of work you'd want to be doing prior to a campaign. This is the most important work. your leaders are going to be anxious before they go and do the first 2 or 3 interviews. But honestly, after that, it is smooth sailing. Everybody's anxious, but can you imagine if you don't do these early conversations and then you have to go ask for $1 million gift? I'd rather you be nervous doing pre-ask conversations than gift conversations. And there's a concern that donors won't be as open, but truthfully, we have not found that doing this model. So should you do a feasibility study? All right, let's look at a few questions. If you want to build relationships and engage your donors early, you should do a feasibility study. If you want to test the working goal and clarify your case, if you want to focus on the few, and, I know this one is a little facetious, but if you want to increase your chances for success for a campaign, you want to do a feasibility study. Okay, so just starting to wrap up here, thinking about how to engage expertise. Number one, you're going to assess your needs, right? Do you need a full service traditional campaign consultant? Maybe, maybe not. Depends what you have in-house. Do you need a more coaching, advising relationship? Do you need do-it-yourself tools, right? So where on the spectrum do you fall? Once you've figured that out, or starting to figure that out, you may be between one or two of them. Ask for referrals. Ask for other organizations in the community. Who did they use? What kind of campaign service did they love? Research available options on Google in addition to asking for referrals. I would recommend interviewing 3 options or consultants, right? Don't go with the first one you found. Interview 3 always. And it's a learning opportunity. You'll learn so much about how to plan your campaign just from talking to campaign consultants. Find out what they do, and then make a decision. You may decide you need just a little bit of support. You may decide you need a lot of support, but there's no reason to make this up and get stuck in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to get ready to do questions. I see they're coming in. So if you want our free readiness assessment, go ahead and quickly take a picture of this QR code or snapshot the URL super quickly so that we can get to questions. And I'm going to take down the slides in a minute. But I'm just going to tell you one more quick story about Christy, who's another one of our clients who did this guided feasibility study model. Christy works at Lakeshore Tech College up in Wisconsin, and she wanted to interview her donors for the feasibility study. So she did this new guided feasibility study model. And one of the donors or prospective donors she interviewed told her he was from the biggest foundation in the community and said, this campaign is not for us. This is not our mission, and we're not going to give to your campaign. Anyways, she was super disappointed, but she followed up with him throughout the campaign. Every few months, she'd ask him for advice. She'd give him an update. Fast forward 2 years, and he just made $1 million gift to her campaign, sort of at the end of the campaign to close out the campaign, the biggest gift the campaign got. And if a consultant had interviewed him at the beginning and said, no gift, she wouldn't have had a relationship with him. She wouldn't have followed up with him. But because she engaged him early and focused on the few and kept going back to him. Now, does that always happen? No, but it would never have happened if a consultant had interviewed that particular donor from the beginning. So anyways, all right, we have covered a lot. The keys are engage your donors early, focus on the few, and engage expertise. I will give you one more coupon before we go. We do have sort of, for those of you do-it-yourselfers, just for being here on the webinar today, I'm going to give you $100 off every month with the discount code DIY100. So if you want to take a quick snapshot of that And then I'm going to go start answering questions right now. So Jay, there were so many that I didn't quite catch them all. So I'm just going to start going through them. But if you see any that are especially important, then please point them out to me. But Tiffany's asking, how long should a campaign ask? We estimate that most campaigns for community-based organizations, right, not universities that are doing billion-dollar campaigns, but most community-based organizations take 2 to 3 years to do a successful campaign. But depending on where you're at, could take longer, could take shorter. Okay. So John, let's see. If you consider your organization grassroots with a working board and a lot of stakeholders, $5 to $10 donors a month, who may be wary of deep pockets, how do you justify or frame seeking out bigger donors? So it's, look, there are a few very successful campaigns, probably 1% or less, that take a grassroots approach. Your example of Bernie Sanders, I would also throw out, Barack Obama, had tons and tons of very low level supporters. Other instances where that might work is after a natural disaster, right? A tsunami, a fire, an earthquake, tons of small donors come in. But 99% of campaigns are completely you don't have access to that many donors. It's unlikely, or sort of that social media buzz. And so doing campaign math, you'll do a gift range chart. If you have 2 or 5 prospective donors for every gift that you need and the math works, great. Most organizations would not be able to do that successfully. All right, let me just check the time here. Okay, Sam, you're asking, when you consult organizations, do you also coach them how to strategize between capital campaign and the annual fund? Is that something most consultants do? Of course, absolutely, 100%. Annual fund is, a critical piece of fundraising at any organization, and it should stay or increase during a capital campaign. It should be a major focus of conversation of both the staff and the consultants and the board, to ensure that you're going to ask every donor for their gift to the capital campaign. Their gift to the annual fund, and then a special one-time gift to the campaign over and above their campaign gift, because you absolutely need that. Let's see. Okay, so somebody's anonymously asking, how long is too long between a feasibility study and launching a campaign? Their organization conducted the feasibility study in 2017. So your feasibility study is way out of date. First of all, COVID was between now and then, so I would say it's totally invalid. But I would say 6 to 12 months is the life of a feasibility study. And you absolutely, it's no longer relevant in any way, shape, or form if it's 7 years old. It's time to do a new one. All right. Let's see. Okay. Somebody's asking, at what phase of the campaign can donors' propensity, affinity, capacity be taken into consideration? With knowledge of the 3 strategies, what factor can facilitate their application? Oh my goodness, this is such a long question. In this era of AI, how can we leverage AI? There's multiple questions. All right, let's focus on the AI. You should definitely be integrating and incorporating AI into your campaign. First of all, you may be doing it already without even knowing it, because if you're using something like DonorSearch and your database, DonorSearch has already got AI working for you in the background with donor mapping and I can't think of the words right now, but you're already using AI without even knowing it with any of your wealth screening tools and your donor database. You also should be using tools like ChatGPT to inspire ideas and kick off your writing. So I'm not saying use exactly what ChatGPT spits out at you, but it certainly is good for first drafts. All right, let's see. I think I've gotten to many of the questions. Jay, do you see other ones that I have missed?
No, I think you have gotten through most of them. Although if we've missed anything, it's fine to tell us that we've missed something in the chat or the Q&A. But Amy, I did want to make sure. I know a couple people did talk specifically about BIPOC organizations, Black, Indigenous, people of color organizations, or organizations that have been kind of traditionally outside of all these models of capital campaign planning, in part because organizations often don't have this big database of people, with people at the top of the pyramid, the kind you were talking about, which work in classic campaigns of either kind of feasibility study model. I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how we're addressing that, especially now as we see some of the foundations and corporations kind of moving away a little bit from some of the pledges and promises that they made at the height of the pandemic. And the social justice movement. Do you have any thoughts on how these organizations can adapt maybe some of their capital campaign planning to include members of the community that would not have normally been on the list?
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think that there are, since the height of, as you said, the social justice, well, the recent social justice movement during COVID, there are actually more opportunities than ever. I think, there is some backlash. As you said, we're starting to see some companies turn away, but the reality is that there are more opportunities, I think, than there ever have been for BIPOC organizations, because so many foundations and donors have turned their attention to those groups. And so it is about doing research. It is about networking. And I think that it is complicated because, there are perceived and real differences and power dynamics between people of color and, a white donor population that make these relationships extra complicated. And I think that the principles apply. And so, the question is how to tap into some of those networks. And I think there are consultants that specialize in helping BIPOC organizations access people of wealth and those kind of networks, and tapping into those and getting referrals is probably a good step in the right direction.
I know one of the things that it's been part of our conversation the last few years is how to make sure that in our campaign structures, but also just on our boards more generally, that we have folks who are representing all different parts of a community, irrespective of their perceived wealth. And I say perceived because, like you just said, perception is one thing, reality is another. There are a lot of people of color who have extraordinary resources, and sometimes they are not understood to be either having those resources or to be as generous as they are. But have you had instances where you work, especially with these organizations like the ones you mentioned, where you found a way to make sure that the board was more represented, that the campaign committee was more representative, so they were doing outreach to people who maybe had just always been ignored, but actually had resources and cared?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're seeing more and more of that. And I think organizations are making conscientious decisions to recruit both donors, consultants, and board members and committee members, people of color, and from different other marginalized groups that are helping them tap into those networks and access those resources. So I think, all of those steps are taken. One example of, I think, a real change in the capital campaign world is donor recognition. And so there's a significant movement to not just recognize people for their financial contributions, or, we're seeing people recognized for their volunteer commitment and contributions, different types of donor recognition where it's maybe not the name of donors on rooms or on walls, but of, if it's an arts organization, of famous musicians, or, and so there's different things, I think, that are strategies that people can take certainly to diversify their campaign committees, their boards, their donor base, and all of those things are, happening slowly and steadily.
And you must tease some of that out when you're working with clients so that they can think about not just how many rooms do we have and how many plaques can we put on the wall, but what are the ways that we really, make sure we embrace everybody.
Yeah.
That's another big plus in terms of consultants, whatever kind of model you may happen to choose, is getting that perspective, but still owning it if they're doing it the way that you suggested. Thank you so much for all this, Amy. I know you're kind of just scratching the surface of a lot of this, and you work with people every day. I know you've provided your contact data, and we've also put that into the chat. But
Thank
for
you.
those who are with us right now, if you'll stick around for a second, two things will happen. First, you'll see some slides that tell you about all the calendar coming up, including an appearance that Amy will be making later on in the year. We have to determine the date for that. Also, one of her colleagues, Stephen Shattuck, who's a great leader in the field, independent of that, but also I know a partner with you on different projects, who on Thursday will be talking about the state of capital campaigns this year, which will be very interesting. That's on Thursday. But also you'll be receiving an email that has a link to a copy of this recording. So if you have people within your organization who need to hear some of this and think about it and talk about it, you'll be able to do that with them by sharing that content with them. Amy, we did have a request for the slides. Is that something you're willing to share as well?
Yeah, is that something you're going to send out, Jay? Absolutely.
If you can share it with us, we'll make sure there's a link to it in the email. So everybody, you'll be seeing that. And again, everybody, there's a survey at the end. So show your love, and we'll make sure that we do more things like this in the future. But tell us also what's on your mind and what you'd like to see and hear, and the people you'd like to see here in this session. Thank you all for hanging out, and especially thank you to you, Amy, for being here today. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everybody.
We'll look forward to seeing you all Thursday. Till then, take care.
Bye-bye.